Fire Nerds, it's Chris, and I wanted to do a quick video on all the responses I got in the last few Game of Thrones videos I did. And I just had so many messages and comments, etc., where people were asking about the possibility of Jon and Dany being twins, therefore being the R plus L equals D plus J theory. I just had so many I was replying to individually that I decided to go ahead and do a quick little video. Let's talk about it and just at least get a discussion going so we can find out once and for all if there's even a possibility of this being the case. So a couple of things that fuel this theory is that, of course, we all believe that R plus L at least equals J as far as Jon being the child of Rhaegar and Lyanna. People do question Dany's true parentage because it's really not set in stone anywhere, although it's pretty well established, it seems, in the books that she was born on Dragonstone. But a few things do throw that into question. One of the things that fuels this theory is that Dany and Jon are mirrors of each other in this story, and that is true. They are kind of mirror characters, very parallel, and people deduct from that that may imply that they are twins. They represent the ice and fire side of A Song of Ice and Fire. The other thing is people bring up that support this type of theory, or at least think it's plausible, is that we don't really truly know Dany's age, or Jon's for that matter. Now, in the books, it's implicitly stated that Jon is 14 when A Game of Thrones starts, and it's implicitly stated that Dany is 13. But people point to the argument that they are unreliable narrators, at least in Dany's case, because everything she supposedly knows about her childhood was told to her by her brother Viserys. But that in itself really doesn't make sense to me. Even if she was Jon's twin and Viserys somehow knew about it, because you got to keep in mind, during this time Viserys was relatively young himself. So even if he knew that she's not really his sister and that she was the child of Rhaegar and had a better claim on the throne, so he decided to try to make her his sister so he would have the better claim, it wouldn't really make sense for him to lie about her age and say she's a year younger or older just to make that story fit, because she doesn't have to be a certain age, because she knows nothing about Jon Snow. Another common argument is that Dany really doesn't know her true parentage, and it is kind of up in the air, but it is stated that she is the daughter of the Mad King Aerys and her mother Rhaella, and that Rhaella died during childbirth. But on the other side of that coin, there's really no evidence in the books to suggest that that's not the truth either. We know that in the sack of King's Landing, that the other children like Aegon was killed, and that Queen Rhaella and Viserys were smuggled out to Dragonstone, and then of course 9 months later she was born and got the name Daenerys Stormborn because of the big storm at the time, and then smuggled across the narrow sea. So that's the official kind of story, but there's nothing really to back that up, but there's also nothing to really shoot that down. You had to assume that there's a lot of people with them at Dragonstone during the birth. It was the queen. Yes, they're all conveniently dead now, so you really can't get that confirmation, which does bring up legitimate questions. There's nothing to suggest that that's not the truth, and this is kind of an Occam's razor type thing. The simplest explanation usually is the explanation. I think a lot of times people dig too deep into Game of Thrones and Song of Ice and Fire, and as a matter of fact, there are some things that do kind of support that. For example, when she goes to the House of Undying, and I did videos on that as well in each of those visions, she has a vision where the Undying call her Child of Storm. Well, everything in that vision was either memories or possibly prophecy, so it all seems to have some sort of truth to it, so why would they call her Child of Storm if she was not born on Dragonstone during the worst storm in Westerosi history? The other thing about the age difference is that George R. Martin simply stated that himself to be the truth. He stated that Dany is about 9 months younger than Jon. So Jon was 14 when the book started, Dany was 13. Unless he just straight up lied to us, that right there shoots down the twin possibility. And the other thing people point to more recently, in fact, is the statements that Alfie Allen, who plays Theon, stated that George R. R. Martin had told him that we have kind of a Star Wars situation as far as Jon's parentage goes. People take that to mean twins because in Star Wars Luke and Leia were twins. Not necessarily. I believe this simply means what we already believe, that there's just simply a secret father. I mean, in Star Wars, Luke thought that his father was killed by Darth Vader. Well, it turned out, we found out in Empire Strikes Back, that Vader was his father, and we found out when he talks to Obi-Wan that Obi-Wan had basically told him the truth, but in a different perspective. And that in his perspective, that Vader had taken over Anakin and essentially killed him in a metaphorical sense. It was only later on when we discovered that Leia was part of the equation. So again, yes, it's a Star Wars reference, but I simply think it refers to kind of the secret father thing, not necessarily the secret father had two twins thing. And another thing that shoots this down for me, if Rhaegar and Lyanna was the mother of both Jon and Dany, then we would see Dany looking like Jon. Targaryen traits are recessive, so if Jon looks like a Stark, being Lyanna, then Dany would probably look the same, or at least close, and not have the straight up pure Targaryen features. And they make a big deal about features, the seed is strong. You would have something to link Dany to being a Stark, and we just don't see that. We don't see her have any kind of, wolf dreams. She has the pure Targaryen dragon dreams, the affinity for dragons. But we do see Jon having Targaryen features in the sense that he had dragon dreams, and that was confirmed with his conversation with Tyrion. And another argument for the twin theory is that, the bed of blood that Lyanna was found in. Okay, well, people say in this world of ice and fire, so to speak, that, the bed of blood shouldn't have been caused by one baby, but two, perhaps that explains why she died during childbirth, because she had two babies and lost too much blood. The problem with that is there's been many other characters in the story that have had twins and didn't have any complications at all. We've had Targaryen twins, we've had Blackfyre twins, we've had Lannister twins, and the most obvious example of that will be Jaime and Cersei. Their mother died with Tyrion. Death was a fairly common thing during this kind of time period just due to lack of medical technology, and of course they didn't have a convenient hospital nearby. So I think personally that it's pretty well established that they are not twins, mainly based off the fact that George R. Martin himself has specifically stated their difference in age. But if they're not twins, they could still be brother and sister, right? So we know that Rhaegar and Lyanna are the parents of Jon Snow. At least for me, that's been confirmed. If that's the case, and Dany is a twin of Jon, then Dany would have to have been born after Jon. Therefore, Dany would have had to have been the baby at the Tower of Joy. Well, that means he would have been born right near the beginning of Robert's Rebellion, or closer to it, if it lasted about a year, because the timelines are really sloppy. That would imply that Lyanna had already had Jon for at least 9 months before the Tower of Joy, and then keeping him safe somewhere out of sight during the war. The other thing is, if they're 9 months apart like our author says they are, then that's a lot of getting busy and getting lucky as far as Lyanna and Rhaegar go. He was off in the middle of the war, which would imply that their love affair extended way earlier than we all thought, for Jon to be born 9 months earlier, because Dany again would have to be the baby at the Tower of Joy that Ned found in that case, and then he would have to have taken Dany to Ashara Dane in Starfall when he returned the ancestral sword Dome to House Dane and dropped Jon off and did the whole baby swap thing. I mean, how likely would it be for Lyanna to have had Jon 9 months early in the middle of this war somewhere, and then immediately after having Jon, within a few weeks I would say, getting pregnant again by Rhaegar, who at that time was all fighting in the war, and 9 months later having Dany at the Tower of Joy near the end of the war. So is it possible? Sure. Is it probable? I doubt it. So real quickly, to believe that they are twins or they are brother and sister, you would have to believe that Ned came to the Tower of Joy, found two babies there, which caused the supposed bed of blood, and then decided to take Jon, the one that happened to look like a Stark, back to Winterfell with him and raised him as his bastard son to protect him from Robert, being the Targaryen hater that he was. And then he'd have to take Dany down to Starfall and leave her with Ashara Dane. Then you'd have to believe that somehow Ashara Dane took Dany somehow to Dragonstone and got rid of her, and then maybe survived her fake suicide to continue to look over her, but yet at the same time she doesn't stay with her. She just passes her off at Dragonstone and then goes over to Asshai and becomes a Shadowbinder named Quaithe perhaps, and there's some possibility to that. Then it opens up things like Rhaella, who died during childbirth. Where did she go? Did she actually die if she didn't have Dany, if she wasn't pregnant when she left King's Landing? Did she secretly become somebody else? Perhaps she's Quaithe. Maybe there is something to that, but you have so many different moving parts. I think it gets almost too complex, and I know George R. Martin's a complex writer, and he likes to throw around a lot of misdirection and that type of thing, but at the same time I still believe in Occam's razor, where the simplest explanation is probably the correct explanation. I think that some things are looked into a little too deeply, which is nothing wrong with that. I mean, I enjoy doing it too. I think there's definitely some questions about Dany's childhood, and I've talked about that in previous videos with the House of the Red Door and the lemon tree out in the front, and the possibility of her spending some time in Dorne. I think there is some stuff to that, but I don't think that necessarily changes her parentage. I think that's pretty well established, and it's just one of those things he put there because you had to have a background story for her. Again, there's no actual supporting proof, I guess, if you go with the unreliable narrator argument, but at the same time there's nothing really against that either, so I believe that's probably just the way it went. There may have been some slight differences, again, with the House with the Red Door and the lemon tree and all that kind of thing, and I think we'll find out about that. But anyway, I just want to throw that out there real quick, you guys. This went a little bit longer than I meant for it to, and I'm sure I missed a few things, so feel free to comment in the comments below and let me know what you think. Let me know if you support this theory, and if you do, what do you have to support it? And before you comment about the R plus L equals J plus M theory, which is mirror read, I'll be talking about that in my next Q&A. In the meantime, you can click here for the last video I did, and it was a collaboration with Bar from BarTube, where we talked about the top 5 characters gone missing from a Game of Thrones or a Song of Ice and Fire. Check that out. And we also did another collaboration video on her channel, and I'll leave the link to that in the description as well, where we talked about the top 5 characters omitted from the show that are in the book. So that was a lot of fun. Check that out. Again, thanks a lot, you guys. I appreciate all the support. Don't forget to subscribe to get everything. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.